Republicans want to make Oregon sanctuary laws less stringent and require cooperation with immigration authorities when people are convicted of certain crimes. Are either of you willing to relax the state's sanctuary laws in any scenario?
Well, what's interesting about our sanctuary laws, this goes back to the late 1980s where there was broad bipartisan support. And if you actually dig in on what that means, we need to have local law enforcement focusing on the things that they should focus on to make sure their communities are safe. And I think that's the biggest issue that we face right now is making sure that local law enforcement is working with their local communities. And really when this gets a little bit politicized at the federal level, that's what we need to focus on here in Oregon.
Yeah, what our sanctuary laws are about is making sure local law enforcement is focused on keeping local communities safe and not on fulfilling the responsibilities of the federal government. It is also the sanctuary laws, what they also do is make sure that victims of crime feel safe to come forward, regardless of who they are, which at the end of the day helps us all hold criminals accountable.
The specific scenario I hear about is that when local law enforcement comes across an individual in the course of investigating a crime and that person has an immigration hold or an order of removal, the argument is that if those law enforcement agencies cooperated, that would be safer for that individual along with the law enforcement agency that eventually makes that arrest in the community. We just saw a shooting. Those two individuals could have died. The law enforcement officers say they were in danger. I'm just wondering if there's any scenario where you would say there could be some level of cooperation to effect a safe arrest.
Well, there is, and I think reaching out to our local sheriffs, reaching out to our local chiefs of police, I know in my community, what they really want to focus on is making sure that they're being responsive to the crime that's happening in their communities. And it isn't focused on trying to be an adjunct or a weaponized group to be able to execute on Donald Trump's agenda to sort of target these families. And again, we're going to be here in the legislature making sure that we carefully vet legislation that is constitutional and that we make sure that we're laser focused on protecting families across the state.
One more question on this. As I understand it, the law does not allow local law enforcement to communicate in any way with immigration authorities, even if they have someone who has an order of removal. Am I understanding that correctly?
People who break the law should be held accountable. And that is what our local, state, and federal law enforcement should be focused on. Immigration enforcement is a separate issue in the state of Oregon. But what we care about is making sure that our state law enforcement at OSP, that is our job as the legislature to make sure they have the funding that they need. And then our local law enforcement is focused on the challenges facing our communities.
And honestly, right, pulling people away from local law enforcement and have them somehow go after everyday families here, it isn't in the spirit of who we are as Oregonians. We hear this again from our local law enforcement, and this has been consistent. Historically, this has actually been a broadly bipartisan thing to protect Oregonians and to make sure we're supporting our local law enforcement.